Hello, I'm Nye from Finale Guitar in Sheffield. You're watching Folk Friend. This is the Folky Fridays live stream. Um, we are very slightly early starting today, so I'll just wait a minute or so for everybody to get here. What I'm going to be doing in today's video is going through 7 classic tunes. These are all ones that I particularly like. I've taken them all off Duncan Cameron's YouTube channel, which is a really great place if you're looking for really nicely played slow versions of classic tunes on fiddles. Thank you to Duncan for giving me permission to use his channel for this. Hopefully in the future we might be able to get him on for an interview as well, because he's playing in Canada and he plays a really interesting range of different types of like Quebecois folk music, Irish folk music, loads of different Celtic stuff, and some quite interesting genres that have arisen more recently in Canada from sort of Celtic roots and bits and bobs from other European folk traditions as well. But anyway, so yeah, I'll be going through 7 tunes in several different modes. I have heard your repeated calls for more DADGAD stuff, so today's video is all going to be in DADGAD as well. So yeah, it should be pretty interesting. What I'm mainly going to be looking at in today's video is firstly what chords you can use. We'll have a little look at some cool shapes in DADGAD. But also I'm going to be examining how folk music evolved over time and what my theories are about the sort of melodic conventions in Celtic music. And I'm also going to be showing you how that's changed as time's gone on and how you can reflect that in your backing guitar. Because more or less there's a kind of trajectory that you can see. If you look at the sort of very ancient Celtic tunes, the ones that are sort of widely in circulation, session tunes, some of them you can find their sort of provenance going back as far as the 1600s. So those kinds of ones have certain sorts of melodic conventions if they're traditional Irish or Scottish ones, and they tend not to do anything like any particular arpeggios in the course of the melody, for example. That's one thing that you rarely find in those kinds of early tunes. You may find arpeggios, but they're going to be either chord 1 or chord 4. You very rarely get a chord 5 section anywhere other than the penultimate bar, or the penultimate half a bar of the tune. I have my own theories for why that is. I will come back to those probably in future videos when I get round to making some videos about the physics of harmony. But anyway, that's the kind of general convention. In more recent tunes, particularly, and in English tunes, you will find chord 5 sections peppered about in other places where there's very definite 7th notes, because the 7th note of a major scale, if you hear that on a dominant beat, it really has to be chord 5. And so you find these sorts of things cropping up more and more as time goes on, which I suspect is because people were getting a more diverse range of influences that they were hearing. You know, they weren't just hearing the folk music that they've grown up with, they were hearing church music, and then gradually more recent stuff, they were hearing classical music, pop music, you know. And obviously in the last kind of 200 to 100 years, people have been hearing bombarded constantly with functional harmony based pop music, and so that's obviously had a massive impact on the things that you see in more modern tunes. So anyway, I'll be giving some examples of that kind of stuff. It's a subject that I find really interesting. Yeah, who have we got? Hiya Sean, thank you for tuning in. Don't know who else we've got out there, but there's a few others as well. That's nice to see. Thank you all for tuning in. So let's get started, shall we? We'll start out with a tune called "The Lark in the Morning," which I really like. It's in D major, D Ionian. I will put a link up for this tune. It's a jig, and it's actually got 3 parts. There's a link to Duncan Cameron playing it. Oh, hey Yvonne, thanks for tuning in. Oh, you're still in Brittany. I didn't realise you were there for so long. That's cool. I rode my bike almost to Buxton the other day, actually. I didn't actually go through Buxton, but I went kind of round it. If you're back, by the way, Yvonne, I don't know if you're still avoiding going out, you know, but I'm back doing lessons at the shop tentatively now. I'm keeping them to 1 or 2 people a day, but I am doing some. So we're the shop lessons are kind of pretty much back in business. If you're over this way. Anyway, yes, there's the link. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to play along with the tune, and then we'll have a little look at what chords I'm using and all the usual stuff, substitutions, jazzier options, you know the drill, standard affair. So I'll start out, I'll try and play along with just the very simple chords to begin with, and then I'll wind it back and I'll play what I would actually play, and we'll have a look at that. Something like that. Sorry, I might have got a bit carried away on the on the simple one. Let me know next time I get. Thank you. Yeah, I will. I'm definitely. I'm well on the cycling now. I'm doing a lot more cycling and quite a lot less running because it's better for the knees, slightly. So yeah, I'll definitely cycle around that way. I'll give you a shout. That'd be nice. Yeah. Good morning, Jack. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah. So. For those of you who aren't too familiar with DADGAD, I'll just run you through a few basic things. DADGAD, as it is more or less a D chord. If I played that as a D chord, it doesn't sound too bad. Actually, what you've got is D, A, D, G, A, D. So that is a D chord with a G put in it. And D's major third is the F sharp, and there is no F sharp in this. So it's not very much a major chord, and it's not got an F in it, which would be the minor third of D. So it's not a minor chord either, which means that you can use it in place of either. In order to make it a normal D chord, you just stick a finger on there, and that's all good, second fret of the G string. So that can be either D major or D minor, and that is very, very handy. There's a shape which is particularly useful. I'll show you it for G, but it's a slidable one. It looks like that. So you've got 2 fingers on the 5th fret, bottom 2 strings. Then you miss out 1 string, and the fourth string away from you, if you like. You put your index finger on the fourth fret of that, and that gives you a G chord. And with that shape then, you can slide it all over the neck and get all the chords that you're going to need at speed. That was a great sentence. If you take the index finger and you move it back a fret, you can get a minor chord. So that would be G minor, for example, with the index finger moved back. And so my complete chord scale can be played with those shapes. So D major, E minor, which is just the two fingers, because if you think where your index finger would be, it's kind of fallen off the top of the neck. Slide it up to, you've got F sharp minor. Slide it up one more and make it major, you've got G, A on the 7th fret, and B minor on the 9th. So that's one way you can play the chord scale. And the other way that I sometimes use is, if I'm descending, I start from my D chord, then add your ring finger on the 4th fret of the A string, then down to this little lazy B minor 7, just two fingers. And then A is two fingers like that. So you've got your two fingers on the D and the G strings, 2nd fret. And then you can carry on down. And the only thing I like to change, sometimes instead of playing F sharp minor like that, I'll just take my ring finger and move it up one, which actually sounds a lot nicer. Instead of that's a lot harsher, that one, whereas that's a bit sweeter, I suppose. So that altogether that gives you something like that. With this tune is old. I'm not sure exactly how old, but it is certainly an old one. And it obeys all the kind of conventions that I was talking about before. Oh, hi Adam. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, it obeys all the conventions I was talking about before. You've got this very kind of simple structure. You could play the whole tune with just chords 1, 4 and 5. Chord 5 only goes on the 7th foot taps, so da da da, ah, da da da, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You could even not put chord 5 on that one, but the next one is going to be the end of a section, so this is going to have a chord 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that. Now in actual fact, that's really outlining the top of chord 4 in a way, because da 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 dum, that's a chord 4 major 7, isn't it? Da 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 da. So there's not actually any notes from chord 5 in there. So if you wanted to, feasibly, you could play the whole of the first part with no chord 5s in it, but let's not go mad. It's nice to have a chord 5 at the ends of sections to tell people it's finished. But my point is that it's sort of obeying a very modal convention. There's no definite chord 5 reflected in the melody, because this notion of chord 5 going back to chord 1 to tell you something's finished, that is a modern thing from modern attitudes to harmony, cadences, all these things, these kind of harmonic devices that were only possible after we invented equal temperament, which I think was in about... Ooh, actually, I don't want to quote a figure on record. Let's have a look. When was equal temperament? Temperament. Very hard to spell. 18th century, yeah. So 1700s onwards is when these harmonies became things that you could play and have them sound in tune and work properly. Before that, if you were just using the modes and just intonation, which is an older way of tuning and actually still very much used in Irish music by instruments like fiddles and keyless flutes that don't have frets, you know. Those kinds of harmonies weren't in popular use because playing chord 5 back to chord 1, the chord 5 wouldn't necessarily sound in tune. And other more complicated chords definitely would have sounded out of tune. So this kind of... my kind of approach that I normally present to harmony is really a very modern invention, and the Celtic melodies are much older. So anyway, this melody, which I assume probably predates that, doesn't follow the convention of necessarily outlining chord 5, and I think that's quite interesting. It also doesn't specifically outline any other chords at many points in the tune. It does sometimes. Let's see if I can find one. Da 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 da. Bum 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 bum. B G B B. I mean, that's basically, that's the top of my G chord. So you have to put G there. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. That's kind of outlining a G chord. Da, 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 da. So you could do all that with chords 1 and 4. Second part. Da, 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 da. It's all chords 1 and 4 again. Da, 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 da. So you could actually basically play the whole tune with chords 1 and 4, but it sounds a bit unfinished if you don't put the A back to D there, because in modern times that's just something that we're used to, I suppose. Da 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 da, like that. Da 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 da. Let's have a look at the third part as well. Ah, here's a chord 5e bit. Although you could get away with. So yeah, it's really very vague in its chords that have to go in certain places, if you see what I mean. And that's kind of the first point that I want to make, is that older tunes generally are very kind of vague, and that means that as a guitarist your options are almost endless. Almost any chord from the key is going to fit at most points. Chord 5 is only going to fit in its relevant places. Yeah, I hope that's all making sense. I'll just quickly run you through what I was actually playing in DADGAD then, because I did use a few other shapes there. D chords in DADGAD, there are hundreds of them. That's your obvious go-to one. If you want a more strident one, the power chord version is very nice. Sounds a bit bigger. That one's very definite because it's just root, root, fifth, root, fifth, root. It's got lots of roots and 2/5. So that's why that one sounds so big and booming. So that is your power chord shape, which I'm sure you've all seen before, on the 5th fret like that. Then other Ds that are nice, you might want a D major 7. I wouldn't use D major 7 in this tune because this is such a traditional sounding tune. I think to put jazzy harmonies in it doesn't really sound right somehow to me, so I don't do it. This is very rare for me to say don't use jazzy harmonies, but in this one I don't particularly like to do that. But anyway, that's a D major 7, which is very nice. It's like one of the little jazz triangles that I've talked about in previous videos. Other than that, I mainly use chord scales for this tune. So da 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 da. So that's D, F sharp minor. I'm just using 2 fingers for speed. I'm not bothering with that finger, so it's just the 4th fret and the 2nd fret on the G string. And likewise, I'm just doing a 2-fingered variant of the G there. That's my lazy 2-finger A chord, like that. I might play the A like that as well. That's a sort of it's the same shape as G. I've just slid it up 2. The only reason I would do that instead of this one, which I think sounds better, but I might do that one if I was in a hurry to get to it from a neighbour. So something like that. So that's basically what I'm doing all the way through the A part. B part. I really like to go down in the B part. I like to descend down the chord scale. So I do it like this. Down to B minor. If I carried on down one more, I'd get to a chord 5. I don't want to get to a chord 5 because if I do get to a chord 5, I'll feel like I want to go back to chord 1 and it wants to be the end of something, and it isn't the end of something, and I don't want to go back to chord 1. So what I do instead is once I get to that B minor, I don't go down to A. Instead, I go to F sharp minor, which is actually A's related minor, and I go on from there. So like that, and that lets me avoid the A, and then I carry on down the chord scale. So G, F sharp minor again, E minor, and now it's the end of the section, so I can do my A. And I just like to come back up at double speed at the end, so it feels like it kind of raises the energy going into the next part. So I'll just play that all together. La ba da da, C sharp, B minor, F sharp minor, G, F sharp minor, back up the scale to A from the start. Da 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 da. And then, because I've done that little run up, and that really raises the energy ready for the third part, I want the third part to be big and strident, and I happen to be at this point on the neck anyway. So I jump up to my big boomy D power chord for the third part, and I go like that. This is a principle that I really just like for two reasons. Number one, because it's easy to play, and number two, because it glues your progressions together. And the principle is that if you can maintain one note between several chords, even if it's not a note that should be in one of the chords, it'll be a nice added note, and it'll kind of glue your progression together. So with this, what I'm actually doing here, I've got my D power chord, and then to make a G chord with an extra note in it, I just flatten that finger so it's squishing mainly the bottom two strings, and I've held down the little finger where it was in the D chord. So that's a G chord as well. It's got an extra D in it, which is G's fifth, so that's fine. So I like that continuous note, and I also like the fact that I only have to do that to get to it rather than going you know, which takes ages. And then for the A chord, I keep that finger held down as well, and I use those fingers just to push down those bottom three strings. And that chord there, that would be A major like that. And this, because A's major third is there, C sharp, which is the major third of A, and I've covered up that C sharp, so this chord has no third in it, and instead it has the A's fourth, which is D. So that is an A sus4 chord. Using a sus4 chord for chord 5, just generally, always sounds nice. It kind of, it gets rid of the note within chord 5 which makes it want to resolve back to chord 1 really hard, you know. So it makes your chord 5 a bit vaguer, but it also gives it this sort of, I don't know, unresolved sort of expectant quality. And I really like that, and it's a very folky sound to have chord 5 be a sus4 with no third in it, because one feature of functional harmony is that the major 7th note in a major scale really wants to go back to the root note, because the 7th is the least stable of the 7 pitches in a major scale. And that's what makes chord 5 want to go back to chord 1, because chord 5, the notes in it are 5, 7 and 9 or 2, whichever you prefer to think of it as. So that chord 5 has got the 7th note in it, and it wants to go back to the first note and sound finished, which it does when you go back to chord 1 again. If that's too technical, just remember this shape. This shape is nice for chord 5 in D major, and it's called A sus4, like that. So anyway, so that's my third part. Something like that, just going down the chord scale. Might put a B minor in instead of the D. That's standard. Sub the D for its related minor. Always, if I put a B minor in, the next chord I'll play is F sharp minor, because that is the strongest progression from B minor. All the others sound rubbish in comparison. Something like that. Yeah, just with, this is a general thing, I've talked about it loads in previous videos about related minor subs. If you play a related minor instead of chord 1, it's like you've taken the story of the normal melody. So the normal story of this third part of this tune might be like, I am a skylark, I'm in the sky, everything is great up here in the sky, singing a song. It's really nice flying over some heather or whatever, you know, it kind of sounds like that. But then if you change that and you play a B minor, it's like, oh, everything's gone a bit grey, it's getting a bit cloudy, the coal mine's moved in next door, maybe the heather will get destroyed. You know, it's like you've changed the story of the melody by changing the harmony. And I always feel like if you start making the story go dark by changing the first chord to a minor, and then you change back to a major, it's a bit like you started telling the story of something bad that happened to the nice heathery mountain, and then you got halfway through it and veered back to everything was fine. You know, it's like you start telling an epic tale and then you just go, anyway, in the end it was all okay. So this is probably personal preference, but if I play B minor instead of D, then I like to follow it up with F sharp minor or E minor to keep that tension going for a little bit longer. Anyway, so that's it for that tune. Let's move on to... Oh, actually, before we do that, has anyone got any questions about anything? I am burning through them a little bit today because I've got quite a few examples that I want to get through. Anybody? You all good? Just out of curiosity, who out there is test driving things in DADGAD? And who's converting this into standard? Or drop D? Oh, all these shapes, by the way, the D power chord shape, and all these slidable shapes, they all work in drop D as well. They're all good in both tunes. The top two strings obviously will be different, but they do work in both tunings with tunes in the key of D. Okay, cool. I think we're all good then. So the next tune I want to have a look at is called the Providence Reel, and I want to talk about the Providence's provenance, the Providence Reel. The Providence, I remember this tune from my mum playing it when I was little, and I've always liked it, but I remember being confused by it for a long time when I was young and trying to learn how to back tunes by ear, because it actually starts on chord 5 and it always threw me, and anyone who knows me will know I've got an absolutely terrible memory and I inevitably forget every single time it gets to that chord. I forget that it's there. Now, after hearing it probably millions of times, I'm getting a bit better at it, but I still forget fairly often. So yeah, in more recent times, when I've kind of got a better understanding of these kind of melodic conventions and how they've evolved over time, I wondered whether this might be a more recent tune, because it's very unusual to have a chord 5 section in an Irish tune, or what's ostensibly an Irish tune, in anywhere where it's not the end of a section. And so today I did some research, I looked it up. The first time I could find it published is in a book from the 50s, and it's widely attributed to a fiddle player called John McGrath, although I have found quite a lot of people on forums arguing about whether or not he wrote it. But anyway, this tune is undoubtedly recent, because it doesn't seem to go back much further than maybe the 40s. So I was right. Hooray, my theory holds up so far. So anyway, I'll play it to you again. I'm using Duncan Cameron's version. It's linked in the box. And yes. Oh, just quickly, Yvonne, if you're converting to standard, the A sus4 shape that I used, which you can still use in standard, except that now you play it like that. So it's like your A major chord, normal one. You just move that finger up one, and that's quite handy. Ah, hi Frank, you're new. Thanks for tuning in. Using standard tuning, cool. Okay, I'll try and run through standard shapes for anything particular that I talk about. I tell you what, actually, just quickly before I do this, I'm just going to grab the lamp, because I forgot about that, and probably it's getting a bit dark and you probably can't see my fingers. Hang on a sec. There we go. So something like that. I must say I didn't play the B part very well there, did I? But anyway, so yeah, this tune has got a lot of bits in it, both at the very start of the A part and in the B part, where there's bits that very definitely sound like they need chord 5 and won't work with anything else, but they're not the ends of sections. And so I listened to this and I said to myself, I bet that's modern, and lo and behold, it was. We'll go through it again. Duncan Cameron is really great on his YouTube channel. I really recommend checking him out, because he also, if you want to learn to play the tunes, once he's played them like that, he then plays them really slowly afterwards. So let's just have a look at why we've got chord 5 at the start. It starts on a really long note. and it's that one which is E, like that. So this really long E at the start in a tune in D, clearly there is no E in a D chord. A D chord's D, F sharp and A. So starting on a really long E very much infers that you've got to have chord 5 there. That's quite unusual. We let it play on a bit. So all that's kind of standard. It doesn't really strongly imply anything. I would do G and A on the 7th foot tap because I tend to do A on the 7th foot tap, but actually if you wanted to stay on G, or whatever it is, that would be all good, as long as you went back to A at the start of the section, which is weird. Etc. Here's the B part. So if you heard that bit there, this is all D, D, F sharp, D, G, D, F sharp, D. That's more or less just a D chord with a G in it as well, but so that's very D, and then it goes da 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 like that, which is E, D, C sharp, E, da 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 da, I think. Da 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 dum. Okay. E, D, B, C sharp, D. So that bit's very much. It could be chord 4, or it could be chord 5. Dun dun da da dum. Because it starts on an E. It's got a C sharp in the middle of it, but it's not on a dominant beat. So you'd get away with chord 4 or chord 5 there. Because the little run-up bit is B and D on the dominant beats, so that's quite chord 4-y, so either's fine. That's if it was chord 4. That's if it was chord 5. I'd probably be inclined to do chord 5, but up to you. Yeah, so anyway, yes, this tune sounds more modern, and that is why. I just thought it was interesting. That's basically all I wanted to say about it. You can do all the same things I was talking about in the last one, joining your chords together with chord scales. It becomes considerably more difficult to kind of freestyle that in this tune, because it's got these quite definite sections that need either chord 4 or chord 5 in the B part. In that one bit, and definitely chord 5 right at the start of the tune. So you have to really remember those, and then you can freestyle the rest, but there's not a lot of space to do that. So for this one it's easier to keep things quite simple. So that's that one. The next one I want to have a little look at is called I Have a Bonnet Trimmed with Blue. There's a link for it. And I'll just play this one through quickly so we can have a little look. It's a polka, and it sounds like this. Yeah. Da, 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 dum, bum, 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 bum. This one I've included on the list because it's really very definite in what its chords have to be, and they really almost can't be anything else. So da 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 ba da dun da 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 rum bum bum, something like that. D G D D D A D, or something like that. The D and the A at the end, maybe you could move them a little bit earlier or later, but the D and the G at the start are very, very definite. Da 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 dun da. You've got like long notes outlining a G chord there. Da da, G and B. 2 notes from a G chord. So these long notes outlining like a chord arpeggio, they're pretty much telling you it's got to be this. That made me think it was probably modern, and it didn't really sound very Celtic-y to me. Here's the B part. Da 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 dun dum dum. That's all very D-y. Da 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 dun dum 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 dum. So that's like da 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 dun dun da 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 dum bum bum. So it's the same chords as the A part. D G D D D A A E D. That kind of thing. So those A's are coming in just before the 7th foot tap, and it's got a kind of too many long notes in it for me to believe that it's truly Celtic. So again, I did some Googling. I Have a Bonnet Trimmed with Blue is accredited to Scotland, widely played in Newfoundland. But then I did some more digging. The first place it appears in publication is a Polish tune collection from 1842, and it's also widely played as an English tune where they play a slightly different version. And then in more recent, well, I suspect more recent times, although obviously I can't prove it, but there's also a 4-part and a 6-part version that have been recorded previously by Scots pipe bands. And the 6-part version, I believe I'm right in saying, was recorded by a police pipe band, which I thought was quite interesting. Yeah. So anyway, this is sort of not following the kind of Celtic traditional melody conventions, and lo and behold, it's recent. Next one, let's have a look at one called Rakish Paddy. This one is very kind of classic. The reason I've included this one on the list is because it leads me on to Mixolydian, which is very interesting as a mode, and that leads me on to a guy called Andy Hurt, who I've discovered recently, who's got some really interesting theories about this, but I'll come back to him in a minute. Anyway, here's a link to the tune. Oh, hey Ed. Oh, that was cool. Oh, wicked. I'll have to keep an eye out for some new recordings coming up then, using all those chording versions as well. Yeah, the bike ride was brilliant, thank you. I had a really good time, and got very wet towards the end of it, but it was good. It is a new guitar. It's new to me anyway. I bought it off a friend. It's really nice. It's Canadian, Simon and Patrick. I think it's spruce. The only slight issue with it is the battery pack is missing its little cover thing, and you can't. I now realise you can't actually buy those little cover things on their own. You have to order a whole new battery pack, which is about 160 quid or thereabouts. So there's no way I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be concocting some sort of solution with a little bit of board and some paper clips, I reckon, over the next few days. But yes, it is a new guitar anyway. Yeah. I hope you're doing well over there. Yeah, so I'll just play along with Rakish Paddy, and then we'll have a little look at it. I absolutely love this tune. What a banger. Yeah, Mixed Lydian is my favourite mode. Now, this one, yeah, it starts on chord 5. This is much more common in Mixolydian. Mixolydian is not like the other modes. I was talking before about how Celtic music is from a time before functional harmony. And in the other modes, I always talk about how chord 5 goes back to chord 1 and it makes things sound finished. In the minor keys, Dorian and Aeolian, it can be that chord 7 goes back to chord 1 to make stuff sound finished, because that's chord 5's related major. But in Mixolydian, it's much less definite. You may go back from chord 5 or chord 7, or you might end a section on chord 4 if you wanted. Mixolydian lends itself much less well to a kind of functional harmony based approach. And from a modal point of view, that's because it's the 5th mode, and so the pattern of intervals don't make it want to resolve back to chord 1. They make it want to resolve back to chord 4. So you have the option of ending it on either chord 1 or chord 4 a lot of the time. There's a lot more to this as well. Mixolydian, potentially, this leads me on to Andy Hurt, who I've been reading this week, his articles. I've got a link for you for one of those as well. If anybody's interested in this, it's fascinating. If you like physics and acoustics and learning about how music actually works rather than just how to play it, then this is an interesting read. He's basically got this theory that ancient Celtic music, and he's taken examples from recordings of Fenian lays from the 1500s, I think. Obviously, they weren't recorded then, but there is evidence of them being widely sung then, and they still were widely sung in the present day in a different tuning system to that which we currently use and which we currently believe folk music to have been written in. The scale that they use is more or less based in the overtone system. If you are familiar with overtones, you'll know that the overtones you get in order are a root, an octave, a fifth, an octave, a third, a third, a fifth, an octave, a third, a kind of slightly out of tune raised fourth, a fifth, and it goes on up. But anyway, so the scale that you can make out of the overtones that you get, if you had an instrument that played only overtones, so like if you overblow a trumpet, for example, goes da 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 da, and then I'll carry on a few octaves down, da 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 da, all the way up to a flattened seventh, and then so anyway, he basically argues that at that point in history, the most widely played type of instruments were overblowing based wind instruments, and that people then sung in a way that would work with those, and so the scale that they were using was the scale producible by overblowing these instruments, which is the overtone series. And therefore, the songs were written in a scale which, effectively, if you're familiar with kind of more advanced modes, it was basically what we would call something like a slightly out of tune Lydian dominant today. So I can play it for you. Something like that. And then quite a lot of those notes would have been a bit either side of where we would expect them to be now, having grown up with a different musical system, scales based in equal temperament where they're equally divided, and those scales being based on just intonation, where you have pitches which are in simple frequency ratios to one another, being the 7 which you use to compose music with. So compared to what people who were coming about from outside of that tradition trying to write the music down were used to, he reckons that they were writing it down using conventional notation based in their modal system, with which we are familiar now, and that meant that some of the notes were effectively not notated at the right pitches, and that evolved into the Celtic music based in the modal system that we play today. Phew, if you followed that, then fair play to you. If I just spouted a load of nonsense, you've got no idea what I'm talking about, then I really recommend checking out first my blog on the modes, which explains how that works and how they're used in Celtic music, and also then have a look at Andy Hurt's theory. I'm not entirely sure whether I completely agree with him yet. I'm still thinking about it, but I think he's certainly, I'm sure he's right in a fair chunk of it, and it's really very interesting. Anyway, the Mixolydian scale, it's got a flattened 7th in it. It very often has that flattened 7th in the tune because that's the kind of characteristic feature of the tune. Whether you believe that that has its roots in the overtone series, which I think is quite an interesting idea and quite possibly true, or whether you just think it's a mode and its characteristic note is the 7th note, therefore people use it a lot, that is definitely the case. So you'll often get long 7th notes because the flattened 7th is what gives it its kind of cheeky flavour. Felix Pankhurst, well, I never did. It's nice to see you on here, man. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you're all well over there and you've not contracted the super lurgy. Yes, anyway, biddly biddly biddly. What was I waffling about? Oh yes, this tune. So it starts on a long C chord. So that could be a C or a chord 5, which is A minor. I'm going to use both because I'm greedy. Then I'm going to go back to D. Then C, A minor, D. So you've got basically just chords 7 and 1 in the A part, and that's a common thing in Mixolydian tunes. Something like that. However, I said before that because Mixolydian's the 5th mode, you can end it on chord 4, because if you think about it being the 5th mode, chord 5 always goes to chord 1 if you're in a major key, and you've got the same pattern of intervals but starting from the 5th note in a Mixolydian key. So you could go from your 1 chord to what is, if you count round, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's effectively chord 5 to chord 1 in the Ionian mode is effectively chord 1 to chord 4 in the Mixolydian mode. And that means that if you want to end a section on chord 4, it sounds quite cool. So I'll try and do that with the tune. Like that. So that's ending on chord 4. It sort of sounds like it's told a bit of a story over here and then it's like, oh, and over there this was happening, anyway back to the rest of it. But I quite like that sort of transplanted feel. So yeah, that's one option that you can only do in Mixolydian. Let's have a little look at the next bit of the tune. Oh, not that one, that one. B part's very similar. C, diggity-diddly-dibba-doo-doo. D, diggity-diddly-dibba-doo-boo. C, diggity-diddly-dibba-doo-boo. D-D-D-D-D-D-D-D-D. C and D you could do all the way through. You could finish it on G if you wanted to, just for variation. And there's one other thing I like to do with this, is I like to play it kind of a funk version, in which if you think back to your D Mixolydian chord scale, the chord options available, well, if you were playing in G Ionian, which is the same notes and the same chords, then chord 5 can always be a D7 in G Ionian. You can always do a 7 chord for the 5th chord, which means that in Mixolydian you could feasibly play a funky 7 chord for the 1 chord. And I really like messing around with that, because you can also rip off James Brown and do... So you can do things like... those kind of things. So I'm hammering into my C. Like that. If you're in standard tuning, by the way, you can still do this. You need to make a C chord like that, and then play it deliberately wrong, if you like. So it's like an A minor 7 shape, but you move that finger down 1 fret, and then hammer into like that. The missing finger won't really hurt it. Oh, I was about to demonstrate, but of course I can't because I'm in the wrong tuning. But yeah, it'd be like... And then, if you're in standard, a D9 chord is a nice option for this same technique. So like that. It's that shape. As it is, because I'm in DADGAD, I'm just going to do a little slidey D7 triangle. Something like that. Yeah, so I really like Mixolydian. It's a very funky mode, and that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that one. How are we doing for time? Gosh, it's 6:30 already. I've got several more examples. I'll try and burn through them a little bit. The next one I want to have a very quick look at. This is going to be a very, very quick look at this one, but I'll keep it in there because it's a great tune. This is the Monaghan, which is an unnecessary 4 parts, but it's great, so we'll have it anyway. tune. What a great tune that is. Diddly dee. Hi there, when you move up the neck, are you playing inversions of your basic chords? Yeah, pretty much. I haven't fully worked out how to get more of a melody out of Celtic rhythm guitar. Yeah, there's a few things. Are you playing in DADGAD, Tim, or standard? There'll be a brief pause now while we wait for the delay. Well, thanks Yvonne, cheers for tuning in. Yeah, Rakish Paddy's brilliant, what a tune. I'm not sure about Tim's tuning, but hopefully we'll find out in a minute. I am more or less, because I'm in DADGAD at the moment, I have all sorts of different shapes that I would use in standard. In DADGAD currently, okay. There's a few shapes that are really useful. In E minor, it's hard to move that far up the neck because you lose your bass notes, because you've got that low D. Obviously you've got to keep that out as you move up the neck. But this is a nice E minor shape in DADGAD, which I quite like. It's like an E minor 7. So it's, I don't know if you can see that, it's index finger on the 7th of the A string, then ring finger next door on the 9th, then you skip out the G string and you put your little finger on the 10th of the high A string. I like that one. If you move that down 2 frets, obviously you've got a D chord. That's a D minor, but if you take that finger off, then it's just plain D. So you can use those two together, pretty useful. Something like that. All the other ones I used in that play along there, I think were pretty much just moving this shape around. So you've got, if you're in the key of E minor, your chord scale is something like, that's an E minor 7. If you add that finger on, it's a slightly more E minor 7. Then that's an inverted D with the F sharp at the bottom. Then G. Then it's A major in this because the tune is in E Dorian. And then I'm doing B minor like that. And you could use C or C sharp. Both of them work fine in this tune. So yeah, pretty much I'm using that shape a lot of the time. The other thing I like to do is, I like these kind of ascending and descending progressions. I particularly like going up in B parts. And one thing I was doing there was doing more or less using that shape I talked about before, but adding the root note on the top string as well, so that you get you can use your little finger then to add little bits of tune at the top of your chords. Something like that. So that's a nice little idea to think about if you're in E minor. those kinds of options. A really useful tip on that as well, if you're trying to get melody within chords, bearing in mind that in DADGAD it's very simple in most of the folky keys to use these little 2-finger kind of slidable shapes to get a lot of the chords, it's really worth learning where the scale is at the top, which is a fairly new discovery to me, I must say. Like that. That kind of thing, anyway. because then you can take a simple chord shape which is only requiring the bottom couple of strings, like E minor there, and think about where the extra notes that you want are to add to that. So you can take a very simple chord progression, just use chords 1, 4 and 5, and add little sections from the melody over the top of it. That's quite a nice way of coming up with interesting chord progressions, rather than thinking of it in the terms that I normally talk about it in, like substitutions and those kinds of things. So yeah, I hope that helps. If you're on that one, if you're looking for an exercise to learn that scale, there's a free one available on my blog, and it's actually there as tab that you can download as well. I can't find the address of it right now, but it's on finaleguitar.co.uk. If you click on the... In fact, I can put a link to the relevant section anyway, you'll find it there somewhere. I've just written kerning instead of learning, that's not right. Page not found, yes, I'm not surprised. There we go. Yeah, so on there somewhere there's an exercise that shows you how to do the whole scale, also without repeating a string, and then it shows you how to do the same thing playing the scale in thirds, which is handy because between thirds and scales you've pretty much got most of the elements that make up most tunes. So yes, the thing I really wanted to say about the Monaghan was that, as with many Irish tunes in minor modes, either Dorian or Aeolian, the sixth very rarely pops up, which incidentally kind of ties in with Andy Hurt's theory about the natural scale, because the sixth is rarely in the lower octave in A parts, but is often in the higher octaves in B parts. So I find that interesting. I'm not sure whether that's just confirmation bias or not, but I don't know. Anyway, the sixth rarely crops up, which means that the only difference between a Dorian and an Aeolian tune is that sixth. So that means that you can mess about with using a bit of both in terms of the chord scales that are available. So if I was playing an E Dorian, I would have main chords would be E minor, A major, A major or A7, and B minor. And if it were in Aeolian, the main chords would be E minor, A minor, and still B minor. And the other ones would be, there's a choice between C sharp. If you're in Dorian, it should be C sharp diminished, but we'd get around that by using some sort of inversion of an A chord, so maybe something like that. That's a really nice option for this. But if it was in E Aeolian, it would be C natural, so like that. So what I like to do is mess about using combinations of both. So I might, for the A part, I might do something like E minor and D. So that was G to A minor. That would give me a dark version of the A part. And then it's the end of the section, so it'll have to be B minor. That's what it would sound like with an A major instead. So you can actually use either, because the sixth isn't in that part anywhere. Another thing you can do, which I like to do sometimes, is to start on either A major or A minor and switch between that and B minor, or to start on either C, or to start on C and switch between that and C sharp, and these things both build tension. So for maybe, let's just pick a part at random, let's pick the third part. let's say we wanted to create tension in the third part for some reason as like a big build-up towards the end of a set or something, we might start on an A major and go to B minor. Something like that. It doesn't necessarily work so well in this tune, but it does work very well in lots of others. Particularly Morrison's Jigs springs to mind. I do it in that one all the time. You can do exactly the same thing with an A minor. That's a C. Something like that. So there's loads of options by mixing and matching between the Aeolian and the Dorian chord options. I'll show you the other one quickly between C and C sharp. So if this is like mega tense, that's my C. Here's my C sharp. Oh. Something like that. So that's a really nice little kind of chromatic messery option as well. And of course, if you're playing in standard, you do it with C and then make a little mini bar like that, which gives you an A chord, and put your ring finger on the 4th fret of the A string. So that's the first inversion of an A chord with its major third at the bottom, and that's your substitute for C sharp diminished. So you'd be doing C, 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 then that C sharp diminished substitute, A in the first inversion, C, 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 then something like A minor, B minor, C, 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 C sharp, you know, that kind of thing. Jack, I play in standards because I don't have a guitar tuned to DADGAD. I still need help to convince my wife for a new guitar. Oh dear. I'm saying nothing. I'm not getting involved. I don't want like viewers' wives calling in like, oh, he's bought another one this week. He's on 12 now. But yeah, definitely get one. Right, let's move on to... I was going to talk about Jenny's Chickens, which I really like, but I'm going to skip it out in the interests of the fact that we are running out of time. So the last one I want to talk about is a really great tune called Tam Lin, which you hear all the time. Some people call it the Glasgow Reel. There it is. This one is very modern. I don't know who wrote it or exactly when it's from, but it's so obviously modern it's untrue, because every bar of it pretty much outlines a chord. It's also Aeolian, the least common of the folk modes, which makes me suspect that it was probably written by someone who was probably thinking just of the natural minor, the sort of normal minor scale that you learn when you learn music in the normal way of learning it in schools, you know, or the classical tradition or anything like that, where you learn that a minor key, the first minor scale that you learn is the natural minor, which is what we folky types call the Aeolian mode. It's the same thing. Anyway, so here's a nice version of it, again played by Mr. Duncan Cameron. Yeah, so the reason I wanted to look at this one is just because it's so definite in which chords have to go in every bar. You really haven't got a lot of wiggle room for any kind of alternative versions. Apart from obviously playing jazzier versions of the same chord, you know, chords with more extensions in. So basically, it do 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 do. That is the fifth, the root, the minor third, the root of a D minor chord. Then it goes da 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 dum. That's fifth root, third root of a B flat chord, and then does the same thing for a C chord. Da 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 dum. That's just a C arpeggio. Da 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 ding ding. And then it's the bit where it always goes from 5 to 1 anyway, so it goes 5 to 1. So it's really very, very definite about those chords. And all you can do is, instead of the D minor, you could play D minor 7 or D minor 9 or something like that if you wanted to. I actually did play D minor 7 there. Dun, 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 dun. Then, because we're talking about the key of D Aeolian, oh, I haven't plugged my mode wheels yet today, have I? The mode wheel would tell you all the chords in this, and if you don't know what that is, which I'm sure you will do, but if you don't, then go and have a look. They're very, very good. You can get one here. Can I find it? Here you go. Bop. Anyway, yeah, so the sixth chord in D Aeolian would be a B flat chord. And so I'm going to play B flat major 7 for that one instead of normal B flat. And then C, I'm just going to play the power chord because it's easy to get to. And an A in the usual DADGAD way, 2 fingers. So that gives us D minor 7, little minor 7 triangle like that. B flat major 7. I like to do a little chromatic link there by just shifting my index finger up one, so like that to get me up to my C chord, or and then down to A minor. Something like that. The B part as well very clearly outlines what chords it wants. So, dun da 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 dum. So root fifth, minor third, fifth root, da 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 dum. Very clearly a D minor chord. Da 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 dum. Dun dun da da dun 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 da da dum. That's the root and the fifth of the C chord. Dun da da dun. And then the next bit it goes like that again, so that could be just D minor and C for those two. I've actually subbed out the D minor the second time to be a B flat, which is B flat major, which is a valid substitute for D minor if you're in the Aeolian mode. And the reason I've done that is because then it leads on down the scale nicely to the A minor chord. So you get C, 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 B, D, B, B, D, B, B, D, D, D. And then it would be down to A minor. But you'll notice that's actually a long B flat note, which is obviously going to clash with my A minor chord. So you could play B for longer, or something like that, which would give you. But I don't like to change the rate of harmonic change like that. I like to, if I've done a chord per bar for most of the part, then I like to kind of carry on like that. Purely my own choice, I suppose. You know, you could do that and it'd be fine. But so what I do instead is switch out to a G minor chord, because G minor is the related minor of B flat major. So that gives me B flat, G minor, A minor, D, like that. And then you've got your 5-1 at the end to make it all sound finished. So yeah, the fact that so many parts of this tune clearly outline a chord is very suspect for its being old. Also the fact that it has so many long notes in it, that's kind of not really very traditional sounding. Yeah, it just sounds very modern. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to say about all of this. Does anybody have any particular questions they would like me to address? Or all good. There's two things that I have done in this video I haven't really talked about, which is those little chromatic linking chords. Another thing, there's quite a few places where I use those little chromatic links. If you've got any two chords that are separated by a tone, and if you're in, let's take the first example in D major, you've got G and A, they're separated by a tone, for example, you can just slide between them, use that little chromatic link, so something like that. So I often do that. You can do it between, again, if you're in D, if you're just playing up the chord scale, you might do a progression like that, so D, 2, 3, 4, G, 5, A, and you could actually chromatically link any of those that are separated by a tone, so you could do D, D sharp, E minor, something like that. Then you could do like that going up to the F sharp, or like that going up to the A. So these chromatic links are always doable. You can do C to D like that if you're in a key like A minor or G major. That's one thing that I didn't mention. And the other thing actually is I very often hammer onto a chord a quaver before the start of a bar. So I'll do something, if I was in a jig for example, I might do something like da 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Something like that. And that is not touched upon in this video because it is the subject of my latest tutorial video, which is going to be coming out on Saturday. I've moved all the tutorial uploads to Saturdays because I realise they get way more hits if I release them on a Saturday than if I release them on a Thursday. So now, Saturdays at 12:30 is the time to look out for Folk Friend tutorials. Thanks Jack, cheers for coming along. Thanks very much Ed, I'm glad you're enjoying them. Frank, yes, yeah, I mean I'm blowing my own trumpet of course, but they are very useful. For the main thing to remember when you're trying to work out chords for a major key is always you need to know what the sharps or flats in the key are. For folk music, you only really need to remember the keys of C, G, D, and A because they're the only ones that are widely used and ones related to them. So C's got none, G's got 1, D's got 2, and A's got 3. And if you remember the mnemonic, I can never say that word, if you remember the mnemonic, fat cats get drunk after eating, that tells you the order that the sharps get added in. So the key that has 1 sharp, which is G, just has fat, F sharp. The key that has 2, which is D, has fat cats, F sharp and C sharp. And if you think about it, if you start from cats, cats get drunk after, that's the scales in order of how many sharps they have. So C has none, G has 1, D has 2, and A has 3. So if you remember that mnemonic, that tells you all the key signatures. And once you know those, in every major key, you've got 1, 4 and 5 are always going to be major chords, and 2, 3 and 6 are always going to be minor, and seventh chord is a diminished one, but it tends to be avoided for folk music. So for example, if you're in G major, you go through the alphabet: G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D minor, E minor, and then F sharp, diminished because G major's got an F sharp in it. So that's a really useful bit of theory just to memorise. If you want to know more about that, I've made a video that kind of explains it all from the ground up and then shows you some ways to remember it as well. I'll see if I can find it quickly. I've probably got it saved on here somewhere. It's called Beginner's Guide to Music Theory for Celtic Music Part 1, I think. Here it is, yeah. There you go, so that might be helpful as well. But yeah, the mode wheel basically memorises all of that for you, and it also tells you which chords are in each of the Celtic modes, and then you turn it around and it will show you it for any key. So if you had a tune in like E Dorian, it will not only tell you that it's got the same notes in it as D major, it'll also tell you all the chords that fit with a tune in either of those two, and then you can use it to work out what your main ones are for each mode. That's quite handy. Also, just to plug another one of my things, I wrote a book which also has all this stuff in it, which is backing guitar techniques for traditional Celtic music, and you can get it as an ebook, which is downloadable. So that might be of interest to you as well, potentially. And while we're here, let's put a link to that. Why not? You have the complete finale guitar catalogue. There it is. Cool. Oh, nice one. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Cool. Right then, yeah, that's it for this week. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope that's been helpful to you, and I'll have a new tutorial out on Saturday, which is a really useful rhythmic variation, and then I'm going to be doing a follow-up next weekend to that, which is going to show you how to use the same technique in other rhythms, so you can use it for reels as well, even polkas at a pinch if your arms are like lightning. No problem, Tim. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah. Nice one. Thanks everybody. I'll see you next week. Cheers, Sean.